Microsoft Azure SQL Data Sync has been part of Azure since the earliest times, but has only been available in the old Classic portal and has always carried the tag Preview. Early in 2017, Microsoft finally moved Data Sync to the new portal and called it Microsoft Data Sync 2.0 and removed the Preview tag. Now, Microsoft Data Sync allows us to synchronize data between an Azure SQL database and up to 50 other databases, either other Azure databases or on-premises database. And there are many obvious business cases for such a feature, such as keeping a cloud database updated with the Office for field staff to view. In this demo, I will show you how to configure Data Sync to synchronize data between an Azure SQL database and an on-premises SQL database. Now, I've already created the database that we're going to use for this demo, and here it is called SyncDB. So if I click on this database and let the portal load the screen up, we'll see that we have this option down here called Sync to Other Databases. If I click on that, we will get the synchronization screen. Now, before I start setting this up, there's a number of prerequisites that are worth doing beforehand. Now, first of all, you need to install a piece of software on your SQL server, your local SQL server or your laptop, however you're doing this. And this is available as a download from Microsoft from this page, and it's called the SQL Azure Data Sync Agent. And this runs as a Windows service on your on-premises SQL server, and it will be communicating with the equivalent agent that will be running in Azure. The service account that it uses must be able to communicate with the internet. Now, I've already installed that and we'll be looking at that shortly. I've also created a similar database in my on-premises server called Local SQL 2017, also called SyncDB, but there's no reason why it has to be called that. And I've created one table in there called Players in this case, which is just a very simple table with a first, middle and last name, and it must have a primary key. And similarly up here in my Azure SQL server, I have my sync database and I have exactly the same table with exactly the same columns. Player ID, first name, middle name and last name. I've also created a security account called Clooney Sync, which has DB owner permissions to the players table, or to the SyncDB database and the players table. With the initial setup, that account must have DB owner access, but it can be reduced once the process is completed. So now that I've built my databases, created my tables, I can now go back to the portal and start creating my data sync. So first of all, we just click on New Sync Group and we start filling in the information. So we need to give the sync group a name, so let's just call it Sync Group 1. We have a tick which tells us that it's correct. We now need to decide on the database, or in this case it calls it the metadata database. We're going to use my sync database that I've already created, so there it is. We can choose to automatically synchronize, so Azure will synchronize on a regular basis for us, or we can choose to synchronize manually for ourselves. So I'm going to leave it off for this demo. And finally, we need to choose our conflict resolution. So Azure SQL Data Sync uses a hub and spoke methodology. The hub in this case will be my Azure SQL database, and all my other databases will be members. If we accidentally or deliberately updated a record on the hub and one of the member databases at the same time, we have to decide which record will win. Will it be the one in the hub or will it be the one on the member database? I'm going to stick with hub, but obviously that's an important choice that you will need to make. We can now click OK, and this will now start creating my sync group for me. So there we are, sync group 1 created. That took about 2 minutes to do. Now we need to select our sync members. So first of all, I need to choose a username. So I'm going to use my Clooney Sync account that I created earlier. Now we need to choose our member database. So we have a choice here between an Azure SQL database or an on-premises SQL database. I'm going to choose, in this case, my on-premises SQL database. And here we now need to configure a sync agent gateway. So let me click on the sync agent gateway. This is effectively the service running in Azure which will talk to our on-premises service that we installed previously. So I'm going to create a new agent. It's now saying download the sync agent if you haven't already done it and install it. So I'm going to call this sync agent 1. And now I need to just click on create and generate key. And there we are, our key has now been created. Let's copy that key into memory. I now need to come over to my local data sync agent and start configuring this. So I need to submit my agent key. So let me enter, let's drag this down so you can see it. Let me enter the agent key which I put into memory. Let me log in. I'm going to use my SA account for this bit. Let's just test the connection to make sure it works. Excellent. Let's click OK. So now my local agent is talking to that Azure SQL agent. I can now register my local database. So let me enter my details. So the server is called Clooney 10/SQL 2017 and the database is called syncdb. Let's just test that connection. Excellent. So let's save that away. I'm using Windows authentication as you saw. Now that the information is recorded, we've now registered our local database, we've submitted the agent key, everything is running here. We can now go back to Azure and click OK. Now that I've done that, let's select the database we want to use. So first of all, we need to give my member, my on-premises server, a name. So I'm just going to call that Clooney 10 because that's the name of the server I'm running from. I now need to choose the database. So it's on Clooney 10, syncdb, and I need to choose the synchronization directional. Do I want it to synchronize in both directions, or do I just want to synchronize from the hub, from my Azure database to all the other databases, my on-premises database in this case, or do I want to be able to just send information from my on-premises database to the hub, which is my Azure SQL database? I'm going to go bi-directional. Click OK. Click OK again. Click OK again. So we've now configured everything. The final part is we need to choose which tables we wish to synchronize. So let me click on Clooney 10 and it's found a table called players, and now I can choose which columns in that table that I wish to synchronize. You may only have certain columns which you actually want to pass backwards and forwards. In my case, I'm going to select them all, and all I need to do now is click Save. If I refresh the screen, hopefully we will now see, there we go. We have a sync group called sync group 1 and a sync agent called sync agent 1. Excellent. So the final stage is let's see if it actually works. So let's go over to Management Studio and let me open up a query from my project. So this is connected to my Azure SQL database. Let me select the syncdb database. And let's just have a look and see what we have in there. So it's empty, not surprisingly. So let me add a couple of rows into that table. So I'm going to add Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal into that table. So let's click execute. 2 rows added. Just to prove it, let me do that select again. And there are the 2 rows. Let's open up my other query, sync. And this is connecting to my local SQL database. And if I look in that table, we'll see that it's currently empty. Let's go back to Azure and open up my sync group. And we have an option called sync. So let's click on synchronise and see what happens. So we've triggered the synchronization. Let's refresh the logs. And it says successfully copied. So let's go back to Management Studio. Here we are on my local instance. Let's select from tables. And there are the 2 rows that have now synchronized from my Azure database to my local database. To prove they'll go in the other direction, let us just insert 2 rows. So we now have 4 rows in this table on my on-premises database. Let's go back to Azure and synchronize again. That's triggered. Let's refresh the log. And again, there we go. So it's synchronized successfully again. So if we come back to Management Studio, go over to my connection to my Azure SQL database and run select, we'll see we now have 4 rows. So we've managed to synchronize data from Azure to my local database and from my local database back again. A couple of useful bits of information worth knowing. If we go and look at the Azure SQL database, which is my hub database, and I refresh the tables in SyncDB, you will see that we have gained a whole host of new system tables with a schema of data sync, DSS, and task hosting. And all those tables are used to manage the processing of the synchronization. There's also a whole series of procedures and functions that have been created to manage it. So if you do at any time delete your sync agent and your sync group, all these tables will stay here and you'll need to delete them all and all the functions before you can recreate it, because it does seem to get upset. In fact, it's generally easier to create a new table than to try and resynchronize an old table that I have found. Something else that I have discovered, if you do decide to unregister your database and remove all the credentials and you wish to reuse data sync, then you may hit issues. I have found it necessary to actually delete the configuration file before I can redo a data synchronization. If you wish to do that, go into Windows Explorer and find the location where data sync is installed, which is most likely to be Program Files x86 and SQL Data Sync 2, and in the data folder there is this XML file. If you delete that XML file or rename it, then you'll find that you can reuse the data sync without any errors. That's certainly what I have discovered. I hope that has been a useful introduction to Azure SQL Data Sync. If you want to learn more about Microsoft Azure SQL databases, then check out my YouTube channel for more videos, or download my free ebook from the gethinellis.com website. Hope to hear from you soon. Thank you very much.